You talk a lot. You always have something to add. You correct people, even when the correction changes nothing. You make sure your opinion lands, even when the conversation wasn't yours to lead. You laugh loudest at your own words. You interrupt. You position yourself constantly. And you call it confidence. Or maybe you're watching someone who does all of this. Someone you know well. Someone you've sat across from more times than you'd like. And every time the same thought surfaces, something about that person doesn't add up. The image they project and the behavior they can't seem to control don't belong to the same person. You're right. They don't. What you're looking at, in them, or possibly in yourself, has nothing to do with confidence. It is something far more exposed, far more human, and far less flattering than the story being performed. Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, from very different directions, arrived at the same uncomfortable corner of human nature. One saw in every person a blind, insatiable drive toward assertion, so deeply embedded it becomes indistinguishable from personality itself. The other examined what that drive produces when it finds no real substance to anchor itself, how it mutates into noise, into dominance over small things, into a performance of strength that only the genuinely insecure would recognize as their own. Between them, they described exactly what you've been watching, and the further you follow that line of thought, the harder it becomes to keep yourself entirely out of the frame. That is where this begins. Insecurity is one of the most misused words in the modern understanding of human behavior. It gets applied to the person who avoids eye contact, who speaks softly, who shrinks in social situations. The withdrawn one, the one who seems to disappear. That reading is incomplete. Insecurity is not a posture. It is not shyness dressed in psychological language. At its core, insecurity is a profound disconnection between how a person needs to be seen and what they actually believe about themselves in their most private moments. And that disconnection has no off switch. It runs continuously, underneath everything, coloring perception, distorting judgment, turning ordinary interactions into arenas. Some people collapse under that weight. Others expand, loudly, aggressively, persistently. Two very different responses to the same internal condition. This is what most observations of insecurity miss entirely. The loud one rarely gets identified as insecure. They get called dominant, difficult, arrogant, exhausting. The psychological root of the behavior gets overlooked because the surface presentation looks nothing like vulnerability. It looks like its opposite. Schopenhauer understood something about human suffering that cuts directly into this. He observed that the will inside every person is never satisfied. It reaches, it grasps, it obtains, and then it reaches again. The person who builds their entire sense of self on external validation is feeding something that will never stay fed. Every moment of dominance provides relief for approximately as long as it takes to need the next one. It is not fulfillment. It is maintenance. This is not a personality trait. It is a condition. One that the person carrying it rarely has the language to describe, because from the inside it doesn't feel like insecurity. It feels like necessity. And that distinction matters more than anything else in understanding what you're actually dealing with when you encounter this kind of person, or when that person is you. There was a moment. You might not remember it. You might not even recognize it as a moment if someone described it back to you. Something you said went unacknowledged. Something you did produced no response. You showed up, fully, genuinely, and the return was either silence, dismissal, or something worse, indifference. And right there, without ceremony, without anyone noticing, a conclusion formed. Not in words, in posture. If being real didn't work, being visible would have to. The way you entered conversations changed. The way you held space changed. The way you made sure, every time, in every setting, that your presence registered. that your opinion landed, that no one in that exchange could walk away without having felt you there. You didn't call it insecurity. You called it knowing your worth, refusing to be ignored, not letting people walk over you. But look at it again. A person who genuinely knows their worth doesn't need to announce it repeatedly. They don't need the room to confirm it. They don't need the last word to feel like they won something. The need to constantly assert, that isn't strength operating, that is fear with a convincing disguise. Nietzsche was precise about this. He saw that the loudest assertion of power is almost never power itself. It is the performance of power by someone who privately doubts they possess it. And the performance has to keep going, has to keep escalating, because the moment it stops, the original conclusion resurfaces. The ego doesn't lie, it constructs. It takes the raw material of every wound, every doubt, every moment of inadequacy, and builds something presentable on top of it, something that can hold a conversation, maintain relationships, pursue ambitions. The construction is often impressive, sometimes genuinely so, but the ego is not interested in truth. It is interested in survival. And a person whose ego was built primarily as a defense, rather than as an honest reflection of who they are, will protect that construction with everything they have. Because underneath it, there is nothing they've yet been willing to look at. The performance isn't vanity, it is architecture. Remove it and there is no backup plan. This is why confronting a person like this almost never works the way you expect it to. You're not dealing with someone who is simply unaware of their behavior. You're dealing with someone for whom that behavior is load-bearing. Challenge the performance, and you challenge the entire structure. And structures under threat don't reconsider, they reinforce. The person who needs to dominate every conversation will find perfectly logical explanations for why they were right to do so. The person who cannot tolerate being corrected will construct a narrative in which the correction was the problem, not them. The person who always needs the last word will reframe every exchange until the last word feels justified. What you are watching is not a flaw in someone's character. It is their character assembled piece by piece over years, held together by repetition and defended with everything they have. Because the day they stop defending it, they have to find out who they are without it. And that is a question they are not ready to answer. There is a rhythm to it. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Someone gets praised. They find a way to qualify it. Someone presents a good idea. They absorb it so aggressively it becomes theirs by the end of the conversation. Someone speaks and people lean in. They say something, anything, to pull the current back in their direction. It happens fast, and it happens every time. Planning has nothing to do with it. The response is so practiced, so deeply embedded in how they operate, that deliberate choice stopped being part of the equation a long time ago. What you're watching is reflex. The trigger arrives and the behavior follows with the kind of speed that leaves no room for second guessing. And that is exactly what makes it so resistant to change. Planned behavior can be examined, questioned, revised. What runs on reflex doesn't pause long enough to be interrogated. By the time the moment has passed, all that's left is the explanation, and the explanation always arrives fully formed, convincing, reasonable, occasionally even sincere. They genuinely believe it. That's not performance, that's the depth to which the pattern has been internalized. Every conversation carries the same underlying stakes for them. Every dynamic has a hierarchy. Every exchange holds the possibility of being positioned as less than, and that possibility alone is enough to activate everything. The behavior doesn't need a significant provocation. It needs only the right conditions, and the right conditions are present in almost every human interaction they will ever have. This behavior never really gets a day off. You don't actually want to be right. You want to be safe. And being right in your mind is the closest thing to safe you've ever found. Because when you're right, you can't be dismissed. When you're right, you have a reason to be in the room. When you're right, the verdict gets postponed for another day. That's what the arguing is actually about. Not the topic, never the topic. Think about the last time someone challenged your opinion and you felt that specific heat rise in you. That immediate, almost physical need to defend your position. Ask yourself honestly, was it because the truth mattered that much? Or was it because being wrong in front of someone felt like more than just being wrong? Like it confirmed something you've been trying to disprove for a very long time? You already know the answer. The need to dominate conversations, to always have the final word, to be the most informed person in any exchange. None of that is about knowledge. It is about control. And the need for that level of control only exists in a person who feels fundamentally out of control, somewhere far more important than any conversation. That kind of control has a price. Every conversation you dominate leaves you more depleted than the last. Every argument you win confirms the need to win the next one. Every room you conquer becomes a room you now have to reconquer. You are not accumulating anything. You're running in place, faster and faster with less and less to show for it. Something about that person gets to you, and it goes further than inconvenience. You've noticed it. The irritation that stays longer than it should. The conversation that ended hours ago, but is somehow still running in your head. The specific quality of discomfort that person produces in you, disproportionate, persistent, oddly personal. That disproportionality is worth sitting with. Because when you watch someone dominate a conversation they have no business dominating, what exactly is it that bothers you? Is it the disruption? Or is it something closer to recognition, a familiarity you'd rather not acknowledge? A version of something you've seen in yourself, perhaps more controlled, perhaps better disguised but present nonetheless. Ask yourself honestly. Nietzsche was unsparing about this. He understood that the traits we find most intolerable in others are almost never neutral observations. They are reactions, and reactions of that intensity tend to have a personal address. This doesn't mean you are the same as the person irritating you. It means that somewhere in what they're doing, there is a frequency you recognize. Maybe it's the need to be taken seriously. Maybe it's the discomfort of being overlooked. Maybe it's the awareness that you too have performed, have positioned, have said things designed more to land than to communicate. The difference between you and them might be smaller than your irritation wants it to be. And that specific, unwelcome possibility is exactly what makes them so difficult to be around. They are not just exhausting, they are a mirror. And mirrors that arrive uninvited never show you what you were hoping to see. If what's being said here is landing, if somewhere in this video you've recognized something in yourself or in someone you know better than you'd like to, then what comes next matters, because this conversation doesn't end here. The observer exists for exactly this kind of thinking, the kind that stays with you after the video ends, the kind that makes certain things harder to ignore. If that's where you want to go, subscribe. There is still a lot more to come. Everyone who recognizes themselves in what's been described here will do one of two things. They will feel the discomfort for a day or two, turn the observation over in their mind, sit with it privately, perhaps share it with someone, and then, gradually, life resumes. The behavior continues. The recognition becomes just another thing they once thought about and didn't act on. That is the most common outcome. The second group is smaller, and what separates them from the first has nothing to do with willpower or motivation. It has to do with tolerance. Specifically, the tolerance for seeing themselves accurately, without immediately reaching for a justification, a rationalization, or a more flattering interpretation. That tolerance is extraordinarily rare. And it is the only thing that actually moves anything. Schopenhauer was direct about this. He argued that human beings are not driven by reason, they are driven by will. And the will does not yield to observation. It absorbs it, redirects it, finds a way to keep moving in the same direction regardless of what the mind claims to have understood. Which means that seeing the pattern clearly is not enough. The will has to be met with something stronger than insight. It has to encounter a resistance it cannot simply root around. That resistance only comes from one place, the accumulated weight of what the behavior has actually cost you. Not in theory, in specific, undeniable terms. The exhaustion of maintaining something that was never built to last. The growing awareness that the performance is consuming more than it produces. The people who actually change are not the ones who wanted to change the most. They are the ones who ran out of ways to make the current version of themselves acceptable. I want to say something here that isn't philosophical, not framed by anyone else's ideas, just what I've observed directly over a long time of paying attention to people. Every person I've ever known who fit this pattern, the loudest one, the one who couldn't let anything go, the one who needed every room to register their presence, was also, without exception, one of the most exhausted people I've ever been around. The kind of exhaustion that comes from never being able to stop, from never being able to just exist without managing how that existence is being received. What struck me most wasn't the behavior itself. It was what happened in the moments where there was nothing left to perform for, where the usual triggers weren't present. Those were the moments that revealed everything. The specific discomfort of stillness, the way certain people cannot tolerate their own company for any sustained period, the way they reach almost instinctively for their phone, for conversation, for anything that puts them back in contact with an external signal that confirms they are still here, still relevant, still real. I've watched highly intelligent people do this. People with genuine ability, real depth, actual things worth saying. And the tragedy isn't that they lacked substance, it's that they never trusted it enough to let it stand without reinforcement. Between what a person actually is and what they believe they need to prove, that is where all of this lives. And closing it has nothing to do with confidence in the conventional sense. It requires something far less comfortable than that. You came into this video watching someone else, and somewhere along the way the subject shifted. That's not an accident. That's the nature of genuine observation. It never stays safely pointed outward. The moment you start looking at human behavior with any real precision, the lens turns. And what you find on the other side of it is rarely as comfortable as the original target. The loudest person you know is not your problem to fix. They are not a puzzle to solve or a project to take on. Understanding what drives them is useful, but only to the degree that it sharpens how clearly you see yourself. Because the real question this video was always moving toward is not about them, it's about you. About the specific moments where the performance kicks in without an invitation. About the conversations where you said more than you needed to. About the times you made sure you were felt in a room that wasn't asking for it. Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, from their very different vantage points, arrived at the same conclusion about the human condition, that most of what drives us operates beneath the level of honest self-examination, that the will moves forward regardless of the damage it causes, and that the only interruption to that movement is the rare, uncomfortable decision to look at it directly. Some people reach that decision. Most never do. They carry the pattern forward, intact, until the end. You don't have to be one of them.